Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and I'm going to be sharing with you the 4 Stages of Enlightenment and the 10 Fetters. This is our last class of kind of preliminary information just to kind of help you guys get acquainted with the path to enlightenment before next week when we start chapter 1 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. I'm going to be starting with chapter 1 next week and going chapter by chapter each individual week. So if you'd like to read before or after class, you could start that at any time. There's the preface and there's chapter 1. You can be gradually reading the book. Remember, you can get this on our website by going to buddhadailywisdom.com. You can download it for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon, or here at the temple, we have them here that you can reimburse us for. So if you'd like to start reading this would be really wise, because there are certain things that are in the book that aren't in the classes, and there are certain things in the classes that aren't in the book. So a combination of the two, you can be fully informed and then grow and learn and develop the path to enlightenment, cultivating the wisdom that you need to move the mind to this enlightened mental state. So I'd like to welcome all of you guys to our class today. As you might know, we start with meditation. So I'm going to start with the chanting, easing us into the meditation. Then I'll come in with the guidance. There's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet, and then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to take a position for meditation, you're more than welcome, and you're even welcome to join in on the chanting if you'd like as well. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Potang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano mahakavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Potang Arahoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly, welcome to you. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or maybe you're listening or watching this on the replay, welcome to everyone. As I was mentioning, today's class is all about helping you to understand the 4 stages of enlightenment in the 10 Fetters. We just recently restarted this program from the very beginning, so this is an excellent time to be coming into the program and actually learning the foundational teachings that it takes to move the mind to enlightenment. So far, I went through and deeply taught each section of the Eightfold Path. This is where a practitioner will typically start their journey on the path to enlightenment, is learning the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards. You're going to need to commit that to memory. So you would be very wise to spend some time outside of class to be studying the Eightfold Path in detail so that you'll understand it in detail. And you need to know what each one of those factors are. And if you're doing that between now and the next 4 to 5 weeks, that would be really helpful, because in about 4 or 5 weeks from now, I'm going to be revisiting the Eightfold Path, because chapter 4 and chapter 5 of our book is all about the Eightfold Path. So if you're studying that in the next 4 or 5 weeks, when we get to that point, it'll be like a really nice refresher for you to help you really fine tune what you understand about the Eightfold Path. When you're practicing the Eightfold Path really closely and you dial that into your life, you're going to start noticing enhanced qualities of mind. It's going to take multiple months to experience that, sometimes even years, depending on a person's mind and how deeply focused they are. But nonetheless, you're going to be noticing incremental improvements even day by day. I've had some students take classes with me, like 5-day courses or retreats, and they come in on the 3rd day and explain how they've noticed difference already in their mind. Just after 2 days of learning and practicing, they might have received a certain email that they would normally be really beat up and torn up about, feeling guilty and shameful or sad, but they got this email and they completely understood it, and their mind was completely steady and stable, and they were not experiencing the same things that they would typically experience. So you'll be experiencing incremental improvements all the way through. But eventually, once you start putting together the Eightfold Path in detail, and you've been doing that for a consistent long-term period, you're going to start experiencing the jhanas. These are 4 preliminary phases that the mind experiences as it's making its way to the first stage of enlightenment. These are enhanced qualities that you'll experience. Things like equanimity, calmness and composure, even in difficult situations. You'll experience more awareness of mind, more concentration. You're going to notice more unconditional gladness coming through in the mind, where the mind is bright and uplifted for longer and longer periods of time. These jhanas are temporary, but they're experienced because an individual is putting together the Eightfold Path really well. And when you start experiencing these qualities, which I'll teach you guys what the jhanas are in detail in other programs that I teach. In this program, I focus on how to get to the jhanas essentially by putting together all the foundational teachings. But once you understand that you are experiencing these jhanas, these enhanced qualities, which you would need to know what those are to be able to know you're experiencing them, you start pivoting your practice and you start focusing more directly on what's called the 10 fetters. In reality, everything that you're doing on the path to enlightenment is to eliminate the 10 fetters. You need the Eightfold Path well underway in practice to be working on eliminating these 10 fetters. But when you get to the jhanas, that's where you really start focusing on the 10 fetters directly. Because what the 10 fetters are 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered about the unenlightened mind. And he discovered the tools and techniques of how to uproot them and eliminate them out of the mind. And when you're doing so, this is where the enhanced qualities of mind start to shine through. So the Eightfold Path is actually working to eliminate these 10 fetters. That's why an individual is experiencing the jhanas, because they've had a reduction of the 10 fetters. But when you start eliminating each one of the individual fetters, your mind's going to actually move into the 4 stages of enlightenment. So I'm going to teach you what the 10 fetters are today, and then I'm going to show you how by eliminating them, your mind's going to move through these 4 stages of enlightenment, and I'll explain to you what you'll experience in each of those 4 stages of enlightenment. That's what you're working towards. So this enlightened mental state that an individual will ultimately get to is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. That the mind will no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that is eliminated through eliminating the 10 fetters. When you eliminate the 10 fetters, that's what's producing these qualities of mind. You'll notice that the mind's focused, concentrated. You'll have clarity of mind and deep memory because the mind's now performing optimally because you've uprooted these pollutions. And those qualities will start to gradually shine through as you're practicing gradual learning, gradual practice, and gradual progress. It's not like there's a light switch. It's this gradual progression. It's like if you had the sun, and the sun represents enlightenment, and there was clouds that were in front of that. If you started peeling the clouds back, the rays of the sun are going to start shining through, and you're going to start experiencing more and more qualities of the enlightened mind. So while we talk about it as attaining enlightenment, sometimes you might think about it as your mind is already enlightened. You just got to get these pollutions out of the mind so the qualities of this enlightened mind can shine through more and more. One of the things you'll experience as these qualities of mind are starting to shine through is your personal and professional relationships will be really blossoming. They'll be at ease because you won't have bitterness and harshness and hostility in your relationships any longer. You'll get to the point where there's not even a bad mood. It'll be physically impossible to experience that. And it comes through the elimination of these 10 fetters. So I'm going to walk you through in a way that you can understand these in an introductory way. And I'm going to talk about what the fetters are, and I'm going to talk about the symptoms of them so that you can independently verify that you indeed have these fetters. And then we'll talk a little bit about the removal of these fetters, but there's actually a lot of things that you need to learn in order to remove each one of these fetters. So just on what you're hearing today isn't going to give you what you need to actually remove all of these fetters, because you need to first develop the Eightfold Path really well. But at least you can get an introduction and a fairly in-depth overview of what these particular fetters are, so that you can independently verify that your mind actually has these, because you understand that none of these teachings are based in belief. You need to be able to learn, reflect, to independently verify, and practice. So as you're listening and you're hearing what I'm teaching you, you'll be able to hear from some of the examples and some of the symptoms that I'm sharing with you that you'll experience because of these fetters, that you'll be able to verify that your mind actually has these. And then as you progress in all the various courses and retreats that I teach, I go deeper and deeper and deeper into these. There's a retreat that I teach each August. So it's coming up this August. And of course, I live stream it from the temple, where I spend an hour to an hour and a half on each one of these fetters. I explain to you what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. But here at the beginning of this program, I'm just going to teach you what these are so you'll understand the underlying causes and conditions that are producing all the difficulties and challenges that you're experiencing in day-to-day life. And that you'll understand everything else that I'm teaching you in this program is to work towards the elimination of these particular fetters. They're called fetters, and they're organized into the lower fetters and the higher fetters. I'm going to explain to you guys what these are. What a fetter is during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were an individual that they were interested in keeping confined to a certain area, like a criminal, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. It's a shackle and a chain and a ball, and they would keep you turned out in a field. And now you would essentially be confined to that field, where today we put prisoners in jail cells or prison cells, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. And this fetter would keep you trapped in that particular area. So when the Buddha discovers these 10 pollutions in the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state. And it's when the prisoner releases the fetter that they're now free, right? When the people who have put this fetter on the ankle of the prisoner have eliminated it and it's no longer on your ankle, the mind is now free, or that prisoner is now free. So it's the same thing, that when you eliminate these fetters from your mind, you're free, you're liberated. Your mind is no longer bound up experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other things. So the teachings of the Buddha in this path to enlightenment is to learn and grow and develop, becoming a better and better human being through the elimination of these pollutions or these defilements or these taints. That's how they're described. So we're going to go through each one of these individually, and I'm going to pause at the end in certain periods of time throughout the class where you guys can ask questions. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, and I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and unmute your microphone and then ask any and all questions that you like about what I'm sharing with you today. So this first one, called personal existence view. This is a pollution or a defilement or a taint in the mind where the mind has confusion. It has a misunderstanding where it firmly believes that this body or this mind is who you are. The mind is clinging to a self-image or a self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And if you're being perceived that way, you'll have pleasant feelings like happiness or excitement, or you'll feel comfortable. And then when you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, now you'll be angry or frustrated or sad or some other painful feeling. And as long as the mind is clinging to this self-image or this self-identity, you're going to experience the difficulties and struggles of discontentedness. It's only when you eliminate this personal existence view that the mind can be free of that particular pollution. So some of the symptoms that you might see as a result of having this personal existence view in the mind is, say you were ever in a relationship as a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and now if you guys were together and you noticed that when you weren't together, you struggled and had difficulties. There's a certain identity in the mind that the mind's clinging to. I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And now this identity that the mind is holding on to, when it's not intact and you're actually single, the mind doesn't identify as I am single. It's identifying as I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And now when you're single, the mind doesn't like that. Or it could be your culture or ethnicity, your sexual orientation or your nationality, or maybe a job or occupation, a certain identity that your mind is holding on to. Like, I am American, or I am Canadian, or I am French, or I am Brazilian, or I am Spanish, or I am Mexican. Any of this I am around your identity. It can be any number of different things that the mind can cling to as an identity, certain labels that the mind has adopted as who you are as a person. You can see this maybe like if you have a certain job or occupation. Say, I am a police officer. And my mind clings to this as who I am as a person, that I am a police officer. And now when I'm not doing that job, maybe I get fired, maybe I retire, maybe I get injured and can't do that job anymore. Now I feel like less of a person. I don't feel whole any longer. Maybe I feel very uncomfortable because now maybe I'm a taxi driver, but my mind is identifying with I am a police officer. And now I might really struggle during that period of time because I'm not doing this work. I've identified as this work as who I am as a person. So you can see this in other things, in other situations too. Like say you identify with I am an American. And now say that you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody is saying something fond and maybe they're being very, appreciative or very encouraging and saying very nice things about American people. And if you identify with I am American, now you'll get pleasant feelings. But then 2 tables over, they're talking in degrading or disparaging ways about your nationality and what you identify in your mind as who you are. Well, now you'll be frustrated, agitated, or annoyed because the mind's like, they're talking about me, right? So if you have a certain culture, ethnicity, sexual orientation, job or occupation or nationality or any number of things that your mind might have adopted as who you are as a person, you can only be comfortable when you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived or when you're experiencing certain things as it relates to that. I'll give you an example from a student, and this person actually agreed that I can share this with all the other students because they know that it will help them. So this individual one time called me up right after COVID, and he was having a lot of trouble and a lot of challenges with going into certain places that he used to go into. And he would kind of order maybe like a coffee for 30 seconds and he would pay cash and then he would just get his coffee and leave and no big deal. But now, after COVID, he goes into the same places and instead of accepting cash, he needs to use contactless payment. And they would turn around the computer screen and the computer screen would say tip, 20%, 25%, 28%, and he didn't tip. And he said, I am having a really hard time going into these places because I am a great tipper. And when I'm not tipping, I don't feel comfortable. And I feel uncomfortable in these situations. And I don't feel like I should have to tip. And I just feel so frustrated and agitated by going into these places. And I'm not tipping. And I don't think I should have to, but I feel really uncomfortable. And he kept repeating, I am a great tipper. I am a great tipper. Well, this is what his mind had adopted, that I am a great tipper. And when he's tipping, in most situations where he's typically tipping, he feels wonderful. But in those rare situations where he's not tipping, he feels uncomfortable, right? And the solution here isn't just to tip, because his mind is continuing to cling to this personal existence view, thinking I am a great tipper. So his mind was only comfortable when he was tipping because that identity was intact. But when he wasn't tipping, then he didn't feel comfortable in those situations. And that was part of his personal existence view, that he was clinging to this idea that I am a great tipper. And he could only feel comfortable if he was actually tipping. So this is the self-identity part of it, the part of the mind clinging to a culture, ethnicity, sexual orientation, nationality, job or occupation, any number of different things that the mind can cling to. But there's also a self-image aspect of this, where the mind's clinging to the body, wanting other people to perceive you in a certain way. So if you've ever noticed when you were maybe in a social situation and you might have spilled something on your clothing and you were embarrassed in that situation, this is your mind having personal existence view, that it's clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, and you can only feel comfortable when you're being perceived that way. When you have pizza sauce or chocolate ice cream all over your clothes, the mind doesn't feel comfortable in that situation. Or maybe you looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair. You started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that when you looked in the mirror. This is your personal existence view, clinging to the self-image. Or if you've ever stood in front of your closet thinking, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to appear to them? This is your personal existence view. And maybe you put on a set of clothes, you looked in the mirror, you're like, nah, that's not how I want to look. And then you got another set, you tried that on, nah, that's not how I want to look. And then maybe you got another one, you're like, all right, great, that's how I want to look today. And now you feel comfortable going outside. Or maybe if you were like me when I was a teenager growing up, I used to get out the gel and the mousse and put it in my hands and run it through my hair. I tried to get every little hair in exactly the right spot before I went out to school. And sometimes I did this for so long I would miss the bus on the way to school. And this is the mind having personal existence view, not feeling comfortable to go outside until this body looks a certain way. So as long as the mind has this personal existence view where you're clinging to the body or clinging to the mind or clinging to this self-image or clinging to this self-identity, you can't be permanently peaceful and permanently joyful because you can't experience other people perceiving you in a certain way all the time. So the Buddha teaches you a solution here, which we've already talked about several classes ago, which is to realize non-self, where you realize that this body is not you, and this mind is not you. The mind needs to get to a point where it's not clinging to any of this as who you are as a person. That's not to say that there isn't a human being here, because there is a body, there is a mind, and it's come together for this existence. But you need to train the mind to not cling to any of this as who you are as a person. Sometimes people have this such a big way that they actually come to places like Thailand in search of themselves. They will tell their family, they're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I need to go find my true self, right? They don't feel whole. They don't feel complete. They don't feel like they know who they are. And they will come to a place like Thailand looking for their true self. Well, they're not going to find it here in Thailand because it doesn't actually exist. They might experience finding new hobbies or new activities, new friends, a new job or something like this, but none of that is you. It's not who you are. And this person might cling to these things. They might come here for 6 months or a year, go back to their home country, be like, I found myself. I know who I am now. I feel so much better, right? But now, when all that stuff changes due to impermanence, because it will change, now the mind's right back where it started from. That it doesn't know who I am anymore because all this stuff has changed. So you need to get to the point where you realize non-self, that you don't allow the mind to cling to this body or this mind as who you are as a person. And I shared different ways back about 3 or 4 classes ago how you can independently verify that there is no self, that there is no personal existence view here in terms of this body is not you and this mind is not you. And as long as you have this pollution thinking that there is a self, then you'll keep having difficulties and struggles here. So we talked about, think about your life when you were a child, a teenager, early adulthood, and then now. Think about your personality and your character. Have you thought about yourself in exactly the same way through all those stages of life, or has it been constantly changing? Right? You can see it's been constantly changing, right? So you can see there is no permanent self there. Or I give an example, if you had an arm amputated and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? Are you less of a person because you only have one hand and one arm? Well, most people say, no, I'm not less of a person. Well, there you can see intellectually you understand that this body is not you. Because if you thought that this body was you, when I asked you that question, you would say, yes, I'm less of a person. So intellectually, you can understand that this body is not you, or else you would have answered that question differently. But in the heat of the moment, that confusion, that misunderstanding kicks in of the personal existence view. When somebody says something negative about this body and this self-image, you get frustrated or agitated or annoyed because of that confusion that the mind has with personal existence view. And then the third way I talk about it is I say, point to yourself. This will help you to independently verify that there is no self. Point to yourself. Where are you? Oftentimes people point to the chest or to the head, right? If you're pointing to the chest or any of these places, you need to look at what you're actually pointing to. What you would be pointing to most likely is a shirt, right? If you look at this shirt, is that who you are as a person? If you took off the shirt and held it up, is that you? Well, no, that's not you, so throw away the shirt, right? Where are you? And someone might point. And now you're pointing to skin. Is that who you are as a person? Is it that skin that makes you who you are? No, that's not you. So, okay, let's throw away the skin. Where are you? And someone might point again. And now you've got ribs and muscle tissue and organs and fluid. None of those bits and pieces and parts are you. But the problem with personal existence view is it'll cling to these things, thinking that this is you, when in reality it's truly not. But the mind, with its confusion, will think that it is you, and now you'll experience discontentedness as a result. So there's teachings that are going to help you to eliminate this, and we're going to get to that in chapter 16. We're going to talk about specific things that you can be practicing in order to be able to eliminate this from the mind so you can get peaceful and joyful. Somebody says, wow, you look so horrible. Where did you get that haircut from? You're not going to experience any discontentedness as a result of that by the time you eliminate personal existence view. But you'll need to practice the Eightfold Path to be able to get to the point where once we share the teachings in chapter 16, you can implement those and actually they'll be effective for you. So between now and then, you can be practicing the Eightfold Path. But just know that we're going to be talking about this in more detail, and there's going to be more teachings that I share with you to specifically go in and target this and eliminate it from the mind. The second fetter is doubt. Doubt is where the mind has doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and the ability of them to attain enlightenment. It's very common for people to have doubt when they come to the path to enlightenment. You might actually have doubt right now, where you doubt whether the Buddha actually existed, or you doubt whether these teachings actually will lead to enlightenment. You might doubt this community that you're part of. You might doubt your teacher and my ability to be able to help you to get to enlightenment. Or you might doubt your own ability to get to enlightenment. You might think like, that enlightenment stuff's for other people. I can't do that. It's not possible for me to actually get to it. So if you have doubt, this is very normal. It's a pollution of mind, but you can actually eliminate it, because as long as you have this doubt in the mind, it will block you or obstruct you from being able to experience the real improvement to the condition of the mind to be able to experience more and more peace and more joy. But the way that you eliminate this doubt is through investigation of the teachings. By investigating and examining the teachings, that's what's actually going to help you to eliminate the doubt. You won't eliminate doubt through blind belief or blind faith. That's not what the Buddha teaches. He never teaches you to just believe him. So you're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens for you in the future. You're actually learning, examining, and investigating teachings. And then you reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then as you're integrating these teachings into your day-to-day life and you're seeing the consistent improvement to the condition of your mind, the condition of your life, the condition of your relationships, you'll get to a point where you have no doubt that these teachings are actually working to improve the condition of your mind and the condition of your life. But you need to be able to investigate the teachings to be able to do that. But oftentimes doubt will hinder you from being able to do that. So you need to overcome that. The way you overcome it is you turn this doubt into a positive. You can actually turn your mind into an inquisitive mind. You could say to yourself, yeah, I doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know whether they're true or they're false. I don't know if they actually work to get to enlightenment. So you know what? I'm going to harness this doubt. I'm going to sink my teeth in. I'm going to roll up the sleeves, and I'm going to deeply investigate and examine these teachings to see if they actually lead to enlightenment. And that's what's actually going to help you overcome this doubt, where ultimately you will get confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to attain enlightenment. That's the actual solution. But you're not going to be able to get to that until you start experiencing improved results in the way that your mind is experiencing day-to-day life. So that's why it's important to investigate the teachings, and that's what's going to help you to eliminate your doubt. Then there's wrong behavior and wrong observances. There's two aspects to this fetter. The wrong behavior part is that there's certain moral conduct that you're probably doing right now that is harmful, that you're maybe being bitter and harsh and hostile, or certain ways through your intentions, your speech and your actions, or maybe even your livelihood as well. There's certain harmful things. You can't cause other people to be discontent, but you can cause harm to them through your moral conduct. You could cause harm to people's physical body, to their material possessions, to their reputation. There's certain unwise and unwholesome moral conduct that you might be engaged in now when you're interacting with certain people. And as long as you're putting that out, that's going to come back to you. So depending on how you treat your life partner, your children, your boss, your coworkers, your family, your friends, your siblings, your neighbors, however you treat people, that's how you're going to be treated as well. So as long as you have this wrong behavior, you're putting out this harmful conduct, how can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if people are constantly being bitter and harsh and hostile with you? Because if that's what you're putting out, now that's what's coming back to you more and more and more. So you're going to need to clean up your moral conduct. It's kind of like if you had an oil pipe that had burst and was spewing oil all over the world. Well, the first thing you need to do is shut down that leak. You need to shut down the oil pipe and repair the oil pipe. You're not going to go clean up the floor first. You're going to shut down spewing this oil all over the world. So the same thing is true with your moral conduct, that right now you might be spewing a certain amount of unwise behavior or moral conduct into the world, and that's causing harm, and now this harm is just going to keep coming back to you. So you're going to need to work on developing wise moral conduct. And in the Eightfold Path, that's right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Understanding it through the original words of the Buddha and bringing your practice up to that point, and now consistently practicing that for a long-term period. Then there's wrong observances. What wrong observances are is where the mind has the lack of wisdom and it thinks that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to lead to some kind of beneficial results in your day-to-day life. That the mind might think that this is how one's life is going to improve. If I do these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, somehow things are going to get better for me. And an individual who's doing this, they're just lacking the wisdom to understand what the real problem is. The real problem is within one's own mind. It's the lack of wisdom. It's the confusion. In order to get to the point where you're experiencing improved results in your mind and in your life, you need to cultivate wisdom. And there's no rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that's going to allow you to cultivate wisdom. So there's no amount of sprinkling water on you or tying strings on your wrist or eating wafers or drinking fruit juice or wine or anything like this. There's nothing about that that's going to help you to make better decisions in your day-to-day life and make wiser and wiser decisions to experience more and more wholesome results in your day-to-day life. So if the mind thinks that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship are going to produce some kind of beneficial result, then you're not focusing on things like your behavior, your moral conduct, to be able to cultivate wisdom and improve that so that now you'll experience improved results in your day-to-day life. Someone might think that they can just kind of wave away all these unwise and unwholesome things that one is doing through rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So you're going to need to get to the point where you can see the truth that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship aren't going to lead to a better way of life. In fact, a lot of people have already eliminated this portion of the fetter before they've ever started learning with me, because they might have already done these things in other places and they can see that it doesn't work, that their mind is just as frustrated, just as agitated or annoyed. They're having just as many challenges in their day-to-day life, even though they've been doing these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So as long as your mind understands this, whether you choose to do these things or not is a choice for you to make, right? You might be going with family to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple, and maybe they're involved in rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And maybe you're just there kind of hanging out. You guys are going out to dinner afterwards, or there's some family event. You're there, right? So you're just hanging out with the family. But if your mind understands that these things aren't what leads to enlightenment, an improved way of life, that's the part that you would like to ensure that your mind understands, and that you've eliminated any kind of thinking that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to improve your day-to-day life in any way. So this is wrong behavior and wrong observances. Then there's something called sensual desire. When we're talking about craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations, this is the fetter that we're talking about. This is where the mind longs and yearns through the 6 sense bases, and it wants permanently agreeable contact through these 6 sense bases. What the 6 sense bases are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. That there's some contact that's coming through this. And now as you experience contact, if you have agreeable contact where it's meeting your sensual desires, what your mind is longing and yearning for, you will get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you have contact through the sense bases that you consider to be disagreeable, now you will experience painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others. So this central desire, the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. So I'll give you some examples of this. Say you were walking down the street and you saw a young child holding their parent's hand, and they're just walking down the street. And you're like, oh, that's so beautiful. This is through the eyes, right? You're seeing something through the eyes that's agreeable to you. It's like, wow, that's so lovely. Wow, that's so beautiful. But now you turn the corner and you walk down the street and you see a parent slap their child across the face. You might be shocked by that. You might be frustrated or angry or annoyed. It's not the parent that's causing that, right? We're not talking about what's wise or unwise here, right? Because in my opinion, it's unwise to hit anybody, especially a child, right? We're not talking about what's wise or unwise. We're talking about what's causing that frustration. Well, it's the central desire. It's the mind longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact through the eyes in this example. And now you might have just seen something that is disagreeable to you. And now the mind is craving that permanently agreeable contact, but it's experienced this impermanence that the mind doesn't understand. And now when it sees this impermanence, it gets frustrated or agitated or annoyed because its central desire is not being fulfilled. Or let's just say the ears. Say that you're in a car and someone pulls up to you next to it in a traffic light, and there's a certain music on that you hear through your ears that is agreeable to you. And you might be dancing in your seat. You might be having a good old time because this music is something that you really like, right? And you get all this excitement and happiness. But now you pull up to the next traffic light and somebody else has a different type of music. And now you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. It's not the music that's causing that. It's not the individual who's playing the music. What's causing that frustration is the central desire. The mind is longing, yearning through the ears, wanting things to be a certain way permanently, wanting this permanently agreeable contact. And now when you hear this through the ears, you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or maybe you walk down the street and you smell some flowers coming out of a flower shop. And you're like, wow, that smells so good. Or maybe you smell someone's perfume or cologne and you're like, wow, that smells so amazing. But then you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer. And now your mind's repulsed by that. Oh, that's horrible. This is the central desire. The mind is longing, yearning through the nose, wanting permanently agreeable contact. And as long as you get something that agrees with you, you're happy. But now when you live in an impermanent world and you experience this disagreeable odor, the mind doesn't like that. And it's angry or frustrated or agitated by that. Then there's the tongue. There might be certain foods that you really like, certain flavors that touch your tongue, and you really get happy or excited when you experience these. Maybe like chocolate or ice cream or some fruit or vegetable or something like this. Wow, that tastes so good. You really like that. But then there's certain flavors that hit your tongue that you don't particularly care for and you don't like it, and now you're repulsed by that. And you try to avoid those kinds of foods. You only try to seek out the foods that you actually want to taste. But now you can only be happy when you have a certain flavor that you like, right? So the mind can experience permanently agreeable flavors. You're going to have food that tastes really good sometimes, but then you're going to have food that doesn't taste so good. This is just impermanence. But with the mind's central desire, longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact, it's only going to be able to be happy when it's experiencing that flavor that is agreeable. So now it has this favoring and opposing, where it favors these flavors and it's opposed to these. Or it has this agreeable contact through the tongue and it has this disagreeable contact through the tongue that is now pushing these things away. You're going to need to get to the point where you just see food as something to nourish the body, not something to please the tongue and please the mind, because otherwise you're going to keep favoring and opposing things, and you can only be happy when you're getting a certain flavor on the tongue that you particularly find that is fond and that you actually like. Then there's the body itself. You could have certain fabrics that you're really fond of and you feel so great when you wear these fabrics. But then you could have other fabrics that you don't particularly care for. Maybe wool or turtlenecks or something like this. Or maybe you're walking down the street and you feel so great because you've got all this space to yourself, but now maybe somebody bumps into you and now they bump into the shoulder and now you're angry or frustrated because you've had that contact through the body that you see as disagreeable, and now you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Again, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, because when we walk down the street, we aspire not to bump into people. But we live in a world with 8 billion human beings. We're going to bump into another being occasionally, or they're going to bump into us, and we just need to understand this is just impermanence. No need to be upset or angry or frustrated about it. Then there's the mind itself. This is a sixth sense base, right? So all these others, you're experiencing some kind of contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body itself, right? There's some kind of contact that the mind's seeing is either agreeable or disagreeable. But then the mind itself, you could be in the present moment thinking about something from the past that was either pleasurable or painful, and now you're experiencing certain feelings in the present moment, and you're forming those feelings based on something from the past. This is the sixth sense base, and there's central desire involved. So say, for example, you had something very difficult when you were a child that was happening, and now in the present moment, you think back to that time frame, and now in the present moment, you're sad or frustrated or angry. Sometimes people call this trauma, and they think that you will never eliminate this from the mind. They think that you will always be affected by this experience, and you can never get it out of your mind. This just isn't true. Right? The mind is just clinging to this experience, and you're forming feelings today based on that experience. Or there might be a pleasant thing that happened in the past, and you're experiencing pleasant feelings now based on that thing. There hasn't been any contact through all the other sense bases. It's just the mind itself thinking about that. Or it could be something in the future. Maybe you're thinking about something in the future, very pleasurable or very painful. And now in the present moment, you're experiencing either a pleasant or painful feeling based on this central desire of something in the future. So this central desire is causing the mind to experience discontentedness, where it's longing, yearning through these six sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. And when you get agreeable contact, you experience pleasant feelings. And then when you experience disagreeable contact, you experience painful feelings. So you can eliminate this where you just understand that all this contact is just impermanence. That's all it is. You're going to sometimes hear things that it's like, wow, I really like that music. But other times you're going to hear things like, I don't listen to that kind of music, but hey, I'm pleased that that person's having a good time, right? So you can get to the point where you're not discontent about that. It's like, wow, those flowers smell really great. Oh, there's the sewer. You know what? Let me just keep walking, right? Because this thing is impermanent. Let me just keep walking. No need to be upset or angry or frustrated about these kinds of things, because it's just impermanence, and you live in an impermanent world. But as I mentioned, when the mind's getting its central desires fulfilled, you'll get pleasant feelings. But when it's not getting fulfilled, you'll get those painful ones, like the anger, sadness, or frustration. And when that's arising, that's your ill will. That can now turn into bitterness and harshness and hostility, or aggression or resentment or frustration or annoyment towards other beings. And now you might become unskillful through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, because the mind in the unenlightened state thinks this anger and frustration that is arising and it's very painful for you to experience, the mind firmly believes that it's being caused by something external. And this is where the mind's ill will arising, you might push people away, or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards them. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control them and force them to do things your way. Because what the mind's trying to do is get its central desires fulfilled. That it thinks, if I push these people away, or I push this situation away, then I'll get what I want, right? Because this person is in my way of getting these central desires fulfilled. But you can see that that doesn't solve the problem, because if it did, you would be completely peaceful and joyful. Or if you're being bitter and harsh and hostile or aggressive with people through your intentions or speech or actions, that's not solving the problem either, because it's only a matter of time before somebody does something that you don't like, right? So if you are bitter and harsh and hostile with everyone who doesn't do things your way, It's only a matter of time before you encounter someone who doesn't do things your way, because this world is full of impermanence and not everybody does things your way. So as long as you can only be happy when people do things your way, there's only one person in the world that does things your way, and that's you. So it's only a matter of time before someone does things differently than you, and now this ill will is arising, and the mind's like growling and roaring at this other human being. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring, trying to fear them into doing things your way. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control people and force them to do things your way and pressuring them. But again, there's 8 billion people in the world. You can't convince 8 billion people to do things your way. So as long as there's this central desire in the mind and it's not getting fulfilled, this ill will, this animosity, this bitterness and harshness can rise up in the mind, and now it's going to come out through your intention, speech, and actions, and you'll damage your relationships. So there's solutions to all of this. With the central desire, the Eightfold Path is helping you to gradually eliminate that, knocking down your cravings, desires, attachments. Specifically, the breathing mindfulness meditation is helping you, because what central desire is doing is the mind's holding on. It's wanting things to be a certain way. So you're training the mind to let go, let go, let go. And then also generosity, where you're giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, or resources. That's training your mind to let go as well. So the central desire is going to want to hold on, but you're training it consistently with the entire Eightfold Path to let go, so that now in your day-to-day life, you can let go. Because if you remember that boyfriend or girlfriend that you were with, that you were really angry or frustrated with, maybe when you guys broke up, or you felt lonely or bored, or you started missing this person, at some point your mind let go and you regained your peace and your joy. But the unenlightened mind doesn't know how to let go. So you need to be consistently training your mind each day, frequently, with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, to train your mind to let go, let go, let go. And that's what's going to help you to get rid of your central desire. And that by itself is going to help you to eliminate your ill will to a certain degree. But then there's a meditation that I'm going to be teaching coming up this Wednesday. It's a different meditation than you've learned so far. It's called loving kindness meditation. This is going to essentially rewire your mind to be more loving and kind. And it's going to take time to gradually wear away this ill will. But your loving kindness meditation will like fill up your gas tank with loving kindness, so that then you can go out into the world and be loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. And that's where the real work begins, is where you're going out into the world to be loving and kind with the people around you. But you're going to need this meditation to essentially rewire the mind. So I'm going to be teaching that on Wednesday. And if you can't attend, it's okay. You can watch the recordings if you like. And that's what's going to help to knock down, almost break it up like a jackhammer, breaking up the ill will and uproot it and get it out of your mind, so that now you can be loving and kind with the people around you. And that's where your relationships will really change. Because oftentimes people think the way to get to a better life is to change other people. You might have people in your life like this, that you've been trying to change them. But that's not going to work, because you can't change other people. But you can change your mind to not have central desire and to not have ill will, understanding that people are going to do things differently than you, and that's okay. So as you train your mind more and more, you'll get some more peace and more joy. You'll still maybe disagree with what people are doing, and you can see like, I wouldn't do it that way. But you understand that this is just impermanence, and if they choose to do it that way, that's their choice, right? And you can be peaceful and joyful regardless of what other people are choosing to do. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on these first 5 before we go into the higher fetters. Remember, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. It looks like Jeff might have a question, so go ahead, sir.
Yes. My question refers to the first and third fetter. In the suttas, the Buddha has a phrase, and I might be misquoting it. This is not myself. This is not myself. This I am not. This is not mine. I don't. The first 2 phrases, I don't see the difference between them. And then, but that last phrase, I believe he does teach to develop perception of not mine in everything. And then the second part is the third fetter.
Let me answer one at a time, Jeff.
Okay.
What's your question around personal existence view?
Because this whole phrasing is, I believe, part of developing the antidote to personal existence view.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. That you'll see that in our book series that I share, that the mind needs to get to a point where it realizes that none of these things are you. It's not who you are. So there's things like I mentioned in chapter 16 that we go into in more detail to be able to help students to understand this and strip this away. Today, this is just an introduction to what these fetters are, rather than talking about the in-depth solutions.
Okay. Said very well. I guess then on the third fetter, some of the questions do refer to a deeper understanding of what it is then. All right, so is the third fetter related to attachment to views?
You could say that as it relates to the wrong observances, that if someone has a view or opinion that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship are going to lead to improvement in your life, that would be an attachment to a view. But this particular fetter is related to wrong behavior and observances. When you're clinging to a certain view, any views, we could put this under sensual desire. But if it's a certain view or opinion specifically about rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, it's this particular fetter of wrong observances.
Okay. I got some adult responsibilities to take care of. I'll have to ask another time.
Sure. Take care, Jeff.
All right. Bye.
All right. Looks like maybe Ted or Kristen have a question. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. Hi, Teacher David. So I had an experience this past week with some work being done in our community, and they're doing some work outside of our building. And there was a woman who, so the situation is we couldn't enter or exit our unit because they were refinishing the pavers in front of our driveway. But I had no other way of getting into my home except walking onto the path that they were working on. And I was going to be very careful on my way into the house. But the woman who was, she's like the foreman of the project, started like yelling at me for trying to get into the house. And I guess I'm just trying to think, there were like three fetters that I think kind of popped up for me. One was obviously the sensual desire, which was the sound of this woman yelling, and the facial expressions. So my eyes and ears made that contact, and it was undesirable, I guess. It wasn't pleasurable. So immediately I sort of got frustrated and irritated with her, and then that's all attached to my personal existence view, right? My ego and conceit of like, she's talking to me in an unwise way, and it sort of, all of those three fetters in that moment kind of flared up. Am I seeing that right?
Yeah, so if the mind's like, I am someone to be respected, I don't deserve this, I, that's the personal existence view. The central desires, like you said, through the eyes and ears, you were hearing something and seeing something that was disagreeable to you. And then when the frustration and agitation was arising, that's the ill will that's coming in. Because even though we talk about it as ill will, that's a really high bar. There's lesser versions of this, like annoyance or frustration. So we talk about it as ill will, but then there's these lesser versions, like a spectrum that you experience there.
Okay. So during all of this, so I felt all of these, I felt the sensations, and I saw the irritation coming into the mind immediately, and tried to explain to her that I didn't have another way into my home. Like some other people have a back entrance. I'm on the second floor. I can't get in any other way. And so I was trying to sort of like calm it down and explain myself, but she didn't really care. And so I just sort of walked away, and then, I was like, well, I'm going in my house. So I went in, but it was just like this moment of like, oh, what the heck was that about? And I didn't hold on to it. Thank goodness. Like it sort of, it went away, but it was just in the moment, I sort of lost, it came in so quickly. I was having a really, I was just walking in and enjoying the day, and suddenly it all sort of shifted, and it happened so quickly. So I guess it's that idea of having to constantly think about and protect the gateways, right? Like constantly thinking about that.
Yeah, that's helpful. And it's also helpful for you to understand what she was experiencing too, is that she had certain sensual desire, right?
Right.
And she had certain ill will that was arising. She had probably personal existence view, like I am the foreman and how dare you, trump on my authority to block off this area. And then of course her wrong behavior came in, right? So, and there was probably some conceit, which we haven't talked about yet, from the higher fetters. So these things are happening in that person's mind too. And when you understand that you're not causing that person's anger and frustration, that's where you feel more and more comfortable to just walk away, because you can't fix that. You can try to talk, you can try to be kind to this person, but oftentimes it's not going to work because their mind is so flared up with these pollutions that they don't even understand what's going on in their mind. They're firmly believing that you're the one who's causing their problem, and they're trying to force you to do things their way. And the best thing to do is just walk away. And you know that you weren't causing any harm, and you can just be completely at ease and peaceful and move on with your day.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to move to the higher fetters now, helping you guys to understand what these are. There's desire for form and desire for formless. These two actually are very similar, so I'll talk about them together. Desire for form is where you have a desire to exist in one of the form realms of animal or human. Maybe you really want to be here permanent. There's desire for form where the mind is craving or longing or yearning to be in the animal realm, which has physical form, or the human realm, which has physical form. And as long as your mind's doing this, you're going to continue to exist and want to be in this world. And now when you get closer and closer to death, you can potentially fear death, and it can be very painful for you because your mind wants to be in this world, but yet it's time to die. Now the mind doesn't want to die. It wants to be in this world, and now it's a very painful and fearful death. Or there can be desire for formless, which is the mind longing, yearning to be in one of the formless realms, like hell, afflicted spirits, which are ghosts, or the heavenly realm. Now, I know many of you guys haven't had the ability to independently verify these realms yet, potentially, but that is something that you'll be able to get to at some point in the future when you get to that. I'm sure you've independently verified the animal realm and human realm, but not all beings have physical form, because if all beings had physical form, that would be permanence. We understand the universal truth of impermanence. There's other beings in the world, like hell beings, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings. And some people have a desire to exist in these realms. Typically, there's a strong desire for some people to be in the heavenly realm. They think that that's a permanent existence, and their ultimate goal is to get to heaven and be there permanently. And that's just not actually true. None of these realms are actually permanent. And there's some people who have a desire to exist in the hell realm, right? There's not very many, but there are people who have that desire. Or there's a desire to exist in the afflicted spirits or in the ghost realm. So as long as the mind has that, then the mind is not comfortable with impermanence. It's still holding on and craving permanence. It's wanting to be in this existence permanently. So you're going to need to get to the point where you don't crave existence, but you don't crave non-existence either. Because craving non-existence would be like being interested in killing yourself, right? So you're not interested in that. Essentially, what the Buddha is guiding you to is not to this wonderful afterlife. He's not guiding you to believe all these things and have this wonderful afterlife. He's guiding you to get to a wonderful life now, in this existence, where when you get to enlightenment, you're completely satisfied, peaceful, and joyful and content in the present moment. There isn't anything that the mind's longing and yearning for, including continued existence or non-existence, that in the present moment, you're just completely content. But what the mind typically does in the unenlightened state is it longs and yearns for something that it doesn't have, that the grass is always greener on the other side, and it wants this other thing. So you need to get to the point where you're completely content and peaceful in the present moment, and that you understand that there is this human life, and your mind can get trained to the point where you're completely satisfied and fulfilled in the present moment. There's something called contemplation of death that is going to help you to eliminate any clinging to existence and wanting to exist in the world. And by the time you completely train your mind to let go of this desire for form and desire for formless, you will have eliminated any fear of death. So that would be very helpful for you, because then as you get closer and closer to death, there's no fear whatsoever. You just understand that this is part of the birth, aging, sickness, and death, that this is just part of the natural aspects of the world, that we're all going to die. So if you have desire for form or desire for formless, you're not going to be able to be permanently peaceful and joyful, because now when you're needing to die, the mind doesn't want to do that. It's holding on to this world. So to get to the permanent peace and permanent joy, you're going to need to eliminate these two fetters from the mind. Then there's conceit. What conceit is that where the mind has arrogance and pride, or you're judging other people. Maybe you're measuring and comparing, considering yourself to be superior or inferior to other people. This is part of the ego. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So what we describe here as personal existence view in conceit, this is what we're referring to as the ego. The Buddha rightly talked about these things in two separate ways, because the symptoms of them are different and the solutions to fix it are actually different and unique. But we're combining this nowadays and referring to it as the ego. So when we get to chapter 16, I'm going to be talking about conceit in much more detail and how to actually eliminate it. But essentially what I can share with you is what your mind does is you have this measuring and comparing with the conceit, where you might put yourself above people in some cases, or you put yourself below people in other cases. Maybe you talk down to people that you think you're above. But then when you put your mind below people, you might feel shaken up or uncalm. Like maybe you go into your boss's office and you feel shaken up or uncalm. You feel like less of a person. But then when you're around people that you feel like you're above them, now the mind looks down on these people. And this is very complicated for the mind, because when you're in a social setting, you got to constantly figure out who you're above and who you're below. You might have been in social situations where either you or other people are doing that, where they're constantly trying to figure out this pecking order. And that's where this conceit is essentially coming from. That when we were in the animal realm, we had a pecking order. We needed a pecking order. In fact, it was vital for our survival. When we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt and how to survive. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to survive as a pack of wolves or as an individual wolf. And when we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because if we didn't know who was above us and who the matriarch was, we wouldn't know where the food is, we wouldn't know where the migration paths were, and we wouldn't know where the watering holes were. We wouldn't have survived. We would have just been this lone elephant wandering in the forest, not knowing where any of these things are. So we needed a strong pecking order in the animal existences, because our survival was dependent on it. So when we come into this human world, the mind tries to maintain this pecking order in this conceit, looking down on people or looking up to people. And now the mind can't be peaceful and it can't be joyful. Because when you're arrogant and prideful and egotistical, when you're measuring and comparing and judging other people, it's going to come out through your intentions, speech, and actions. And people are going to tend to push you aside because they don't like that. Right? And then when you're shaken up around your boss, they can't think of you as a reliable or trustworthy person or dependable person, because your mind's all shaken up in this situation. So by getting rid of conceit, you can just then treat everybody equally. You can treat everybody the same. Whereas if you have certain ways of treating some people and other ways of treating other people, your mind's having to constantly figure that out. And now your mind is burdened with having to function in different ways among different people. Whereas if you just treat everybody the same and everybody's equal, when you see that person sweeping the streets out on the street, you can just say, hello, how are you, sir? How are you, ma'am? How are you doing this morning? Good morning, right? And if you see the king of Thailand walking down the street, you can say, hello, sir. How are you? How are you doing this morning? You can just treat everybody the same. Everyone's equal in your own mind. And now other people might be judging you, but you don't need to subscribe to that. So you can eliminate this conceit, and your mind will reside peaceful and joyful in all situations, because you can just treat everybody equally. Then there's restlessness. What restlessness is where the mind is confused and distracted or worried, having anxiety, an overactive mind. If you've ever sat somewhere before and you like bobbed your knee, or you like tapped your finger or you tapped a pencil over and over and over again, this is the restlessness from the mind. A lot of this will get eliminated through eliminating your central desire, but once your central desire is eliminated, there can still be some residual clinging in the mind that produces this restlessness, where there's this overactivity in the mind. And you can eliminate that through eliminating this fetter, where your mind can reside peaceful and joyful, calm and steady, relaxed, attentive and alert, and you won't have this overactivity in your mind. And that'll allow your mind to experience the peace and the joy. Then there's the fetter of all fetters. This is ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. This is the fetter that's allowing all the other fetters to exist in the mind and motivate all the unskillful things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. This ignorance, this word is actually translated from what the Buddha used, but I suggest that this word is not the accurate word to use, because a Buddha and an enlightened being isn't going to talk in a derogatory and degrading way towards others. So the Buddha never referred to anyone as ignorant or a fool or stupid or something like that. That would be the conceit. That would be looking down on somebody, right? Instead, a better way to think about this is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion, the misunderstanding, the misperceptions that the mind has. That because of the mind's lack of wisdom, that it continues to struggle and have difficulties in your day-to-day life. For example, one of the things the mind lacks wisdom of is that your mind is causing your own discontent feelings. People firmly believe in the unenlightened state that it's other people that are causing you to be angry or frustrated. That's part of this ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. So the mind needs to become wise through learning, examining, investigating, through reflecting to independently verify, and through practicing teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life to be able to see the truth. You're going to need to learn wisdom about things like the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the five precepts, the three wholesome and unwholesome roots, the natural law of Dhamma, the cycle of rebirth. All of these things are going to be shared with you throughout the various programs and courses and retreats that I share with you. But remember, you're not believing any of this stuff, because belief will not lead to improvement of your mind. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. And just like maybe we grew up with Santa Claus, believing in Santa Claus, at some point, our mind was rocked. I don't know about you, but at the age of 8, my sister came and told me, she's like, I saw mom and dad eating the cookies and drinking the milk last night. And I was like, are you serious? Right? And I learned that Santa Claus didn't exist. And boy, was my world shaken up, right? Because I was holding on to this belief. And now I found out information that was rocking this belief. And now the mind's all shaken up from that. So if you believe something, you don't know whether it's true or false, you're just believing it. But what you would like to get to is where you know the truth, because that's what's going to antidote this ignorance, is knowing with wisdom what is the truth. And you get to that through learning, through independently verifying, and through practicing. And you'll know with 100% certainty, in the example of Santa Claus, that Santa Claus doesn't exist. Right? No matter how many Christmas carols I hear, no matter how many people in red suits with a gray beard that I see, I know that that's not Santa Claus. That's just somebody pretending to be this character. So you need to get to that point where you know with 100% certainty that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that it's the central desire, that this ill will is coming from your own mind, that it's not other people that are causing it. You're going to need to know things like the 10 Fetters and meditation training and all these other things. That's what's going to awaken your mind and help you to be able to eradicate these pollutions. But as long as this ignorance is in the mind, you wouldn't be able to do that. So that's why you're not interested in believing any of the teachings. You would like to independently verify each aspect of the teachings. And the way that you eliminate this ignorance is not just through intellectual learning, because there's intellectual learning that you need to do, right? That's part of getting more and more wisdom, is you need to do the investigation and examination. The way you eliminate this ignorance is, yes, you start with the intellectual learning, but you need to integrate those teachings into your day-to-day life. You need to practice the teachings, making wise decisions. That's where the ignorance is actually eradicated. Because we might have known at some point during our life intellectually that it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol, for example. But because of our lack of wisdom, because of our ignorance and our unknowing of true reality, we still chose to do it, right? Because our mind wasn't fully wise to the fact of putting this poison into our body, that it's affecting our mind, it's affecting our relationships, it's affecting our ability to have wealth and income and things like this, right? So it's not just an intellectual pursuit to eliminate the ignorance. There's a certain aspect of intellectual learning that you need to do, but then you need to take that intellectual learning, integrating it into your life, and now making wise decisions, like walking away from an argument, right? Somebody's trying to argue with you, using this example from Kristen, knowing that, hey, I can't solve this person's anger, let me just walk away. Rather than just sit there and argue and yell and holler and vent and be bitter and harsh and hostile. You understand, that's unwise. It's not going to solve anything. Let me just walk away, right? No need to do that, right? So you need to be able to practice the teachings. And this is how people know when someone's enlightened, is they can see through their practice. So I'm going to stop here and see what questions you might have about the 5 higher fetters. So you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So we have a question coming in here. I think this is maybe Marta. Dear Teacher David, if there is no self, no body, no mind, then how to call ourselves a being? So I didn't say that there is no body. I didn't say that there isn't no mind. There is a body. There is a mind. Right? They've come together for this existence, and we refer to this as a person or a human being. So the no self is to help you understand not to cling to this body or this mind as who you are as a person. So there is a being here that is in existence, but as long as your mind clings to not only the self-image or the self-identity, but you can even cling to your views and opinions, right? Your perceptions, right? Like maybe if you're in a political system like I am Democrat, I am Republican, and now you're clinging to those thoughts, and now you argue and bitter and hostile and harsh and frustrated when people disagree with you, right? Or you might cling to certain decisions that you made in the past. Maybe somebody was taught that I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. No, I'm not an alcoholic. I used to use alcohol in the past. This being made choices to drink alcohol in the past, but I don't need to identify with I am an alcoholic. That's not something I need to cling to, because then you might have guilt and shame or things like this that come into your mind. You can just understand that, this being made unwise decisions in the past, but those aren't decisions that I'm making now, and those decisions don't define who I am as a person. And of course, people teach you these things, that I am an alcoholic and I am an addict, because they're teaching you to never use these substances ever again, which is wise. But our mind doesn't need to cling to this. So you need to get to the point where you understand there is a body and there is a mind, but you don't view this as who you are, and including your views and opinions and your choices and decisions, that none of these things are you, but instead they're just impermanent things that are happening. But be aware that the mind's going to be constantly trying to grab onto something and determining, like, this is me, this is who I am. Because sometimes people say, well, if I'm not the body and I'm not the mind, then who am I? What am I? Right? Well, that's just the mind continuing to grasp, to hold on to something. It's trying to cling to something. And as long as you cling to something and you want it to be permanent, now when it changes, your mind's going to have difficulties or struggles with that. So you need to get to the point where you let all this go. And there's more for you to learn to be able to understand how to do that. So even though we're talking about what needs to happen and what these pollutions are, I'm going to be helping you all the way through this program understand how to eliminate each one of them. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So now that we're starting to understand the 10 fetters, these 10 pollutions in the mind, when you start eliminating these, which the Eightfold Path is going to help you to be able to do, and then there's other teachings, of course, that you're going to need in order to really eradicate these 100%. But this program is going to help you really get your arms around a lot of this. But then there's more for you to learn after this. But as you're starting to eliminate these 10 fetters, your mind's going to move through the 4 stages of enlightenment. These 4 stages are referred to as stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. It's referred to as stream enterer. That's the first stage of enlightenment, because just like when you have a log that enters the stream and is going to eventually get to the ocean, the same thing is true about an individual who gets to the first stage of enlightenment. they're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time, either in this life or some future life. A once returner is an individual who's gotten to this stage of enlightenment, and if they die in that stage of enlightenment, they will come back to the world in the human existence one more time, and they will then get to enlightenment in that life. So some of you guys might have actually been stream enterers or once returners in your past lives, and now's your opportunity to get to enlightenment. Then there's something called a non-returner. If someone dies in this stage of enlightenment, they will be reborn into the heavenly world, and then they will get to enlightenment there. And as I mentioned before, many of you guys haven't had the opportunity to independently verify the cycle of rebirth or these 5 realms, but there's ability for you to do that in the future. It's not something you need to look at right now, but just understand that there's this type of understanding in the teachings of the Buddha, because he's teaching you true reality of what's really truly happening. Then there's something called an arahant. This is how they would refer to an enlightened being during the lifetime of the Buddha. This person has purified their mind and they are actually enlightened. Then there's something called a Buddha, which I'm going to explain to you guys what that is as well. So when you eliminate the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior in observances, the mind is now in the first stage of enlightenment. This is called a stream enterer. And if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back to the world no more than 7 times in the human world. And now you have improved opportunities to be able to get to enlightenment. When you get to this stage of enlightenment, having eliminated these 3 fetters, you will have significantly reduced your discontentedness. Whatever discontentedness you experience when you are off the path to enlightenment, it'll be a mere fraction of that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And your mind won't regress backwards. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind will never regress backwards. When you are in the jhanas, your mind can actually regress if you become complacent. But in the first stage of enlightenment, that's not the case. Your mind actually won't regress from there. Whatever qualities you're experiencing, you will continue to experience those for the rest of this life, and you have the opportunity to continue from there forward. But if you happen to die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the human world. If you continue to practice, you will get to this second stage of enlightenment, where your mind has already eliminated the first 3 fetters, but now you've thinned out number 4 and 5. You've kind of reduced them to a certain degree. And now, once again, your discontentedness has dramatically minimized because of this reduction of central desire and ill will. So if you're noticing that you're not as interested in sex anymore, this is an indication that the mind is starting to eliminate its central desire. So this is something that individual can experience. Or if you're noticing that you don't have as much anger and hostility and bitterness that you once did at a certain point in time in your life, maybe as a teenager or something like that, or early adulthood, this is a reduction of ill will. So this is the second stage of enlightenment. If someone dies in this stage, they will come back into the human world and get to enlightenment in that next life. So again, some of you guys might have been a stream enterer or once returner in your previous lives, and now's your opportunity to get to enlightenment. Then there's the third stage of enlightenment, which is referred to as a non-returner, because that individual, if they die, they will be reborn in the heavenly world and actually get to enlightenment in that existence. They would have eliminated all 5 of the lower fetters. And this individual is only experiencing discontentedness about once every 2 months, once every 3, 4, maybe 6 months. So it's very infrequent and is very insignificant when it's occurring. It might be 30 seconds to a minute of discontentedness. And oftentimes it's all inward, that you might not even know outwardly that this person is actually even discontent, because their mind is just maybe slightly annoyed or frustrated or feeling a little bit icky. And because of this, an individual in the third stage of enlightenment can become somewhat complacent, because it's very infrequent and very insignificant when there's discontentedness. But you need to remain diligent and dedicated in paying attention to your mind, so that anytime your mind's experiencing discontentedness, you can eliminate it. By this point in time, you will know exactly what's causing it. It's craving, desire, attachment. There's some longing or yearning in the mind that's causing it, or there's some other aspect of the mind that's having difficulties, and you'll know what it is, and you'll be able to address it and eliminate it from the mind. So you need to stay dedicated, determined, and diligent in this stage of enlightenment, because you're only experiencing discontentedness every so often. Then an individual who's eliminated all the 10 fetters, their mind's completely purified, this individual is referred to as an arahant, or today we might refer to this person as an enlightened being. That they fully purified their mind, they're not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that there's no discontentedness. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience anger or sadness or frustration because the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings have been uprooted. These pollutions no longer exist in the mind, and the mind will never experience discontentedness ever again. And when someone dies in this stage of enlightenment, they are not reborn anywhere. The Buddha leaves it as an undeclared teaching, what comes next for an enlightened being. And I have certain reasons why I think he did that, but he did it wisely, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're so peaceful and joyful in the present moment, you're not going to care what's next, if there is anything next at all. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. Then there's something called a Buddha. Buddha is an arahant, but they're very rare in the world, right? So oftentimes people say that everybody is a Buddha, and that's not actually true, that not everybody is a Buddha. So while some people might say everybody is a Buddha today, the Buddha himself didn't actually say that. The Buddha said that it's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. And we refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. An individual who's a Buddha, they've gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. These are the 3 main criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. And the thing that allows them to get to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides is because they have a deep, profound memory, being able to recall countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well. And they put together all that wisdom to be able to get to enlightenment in their last life by themselves. So for example, your mind is like a hard drive that has a limited capacity. You have maybe 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of space. And now in the last 5 or 10 years, you can pretty much remember the things that you've been doing for the last 5 or 10 years. But when you go back to your childhood and you think about that, you just have spotty memories because you've had to delete those files in order to store new files. Where an individual who is going to become a Buddha, they don't have that. They have an unlimited capacity that they can remember countless details from their current life and their past lives too, and they put together all that wisdom to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves. So that's how they actually do it, through this profound memory that they have. They can also quickly determine the condition of someone else's mind through observing the qualities of their mind. And then if that person's a student, they would offer them teachings to be able to help that individual, to be able to learn and grow and develop. This is one of the things that makes them so effective as a teacher, is that they can observe the quality of their students' minds and then help them with teachings. So even though a Buddha would be able to observe the quality of anybody's mind, they're not going to just give unsolicited guidance, right? They're not going to just be in a restaurant and be like, by the way, sir, you're talking with a lot of conceit. I suggest that you stop that, right? They're not going to do that. That would be arrogant and prideful. They're only going to use this ability when they're helping their students. Then lastly, an individual who's a Buddha, they're going to have a deep practice of their own teachings. They're going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, that's what they're practicing as well. Because an individual who's wise enough to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides, they also know that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So they're going to be teaching certain teachings that lead to enlightenment. And once their mind has been upgraded to that level, they're going to just constantly be practicing those same teachings. So a student's going to be able to learn what is right speech through the discourses and through the actual teachings, but also through observing their teacher, learning through actually observing them and seeing how they talk or seeing how they interact in the world. So a Buddha understands this. So they're going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings, teaching just as much through their actions as they are through their spoken words. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is everything that I have to share with you guys today to be able to help you guys understand these 4 stages of enlightenment in the 10 fetters. So it looks like Jeff is back from his adult duties. What do you got there, Jeff, as a question?
I just wanted to finish up the main question for the third fetter. I was wondering, why does this hinder enlightenment? Is it because it's an attachment?
Okay, so if you have wrong behavior, that means the mind isn't wise to the natural law of karma. It doesn't understand that speaking with lies or slander or harsh speech or frivolous speech, for example, it doesn't understand that it's unwise and how you're causing harm through that and how now this harm is going to come back to you. Because if you are speaking, say, lies, people are going to see you as undependable, unreliable, untrustworthy. So now, as you're putting that out, you're going to be experiencing difficulties in your own life because people aren't going to see you as trustworthy. You're not going to be able to improve your life. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're living the ideal life, right? The teachings of the Buddha aren't about getting to some afterlife. It's about creating this ideal life for yourself that you're actually living on a day-by-day basis. And as long as you're practicing wrong behaviors and causing harm through your moral conduct, that's all just going to be coming back to you. And how could you be living an ideal life if you've constantly got these difficulties and struggles where people are being bitter and harsh and hostile and frustrated and all this stuff? And even as an enlightened being, you're going to experience a certain degree of that, but it's very minimal. And when you're experiencing it, your mind's going to be fully protected from that. So the wrong behavior is going to hinder you because you're going to be putting out this harm, and this harm is going to keep coming back to you. The wrong observances, that's going to hinder you because your mind's not understanding what the real problem is, which is the lack of wisdom and that ignorance, that 10th fetter. Because if the mind doesn't understand that 10th fetter, then it might be out there doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, thinking that somehow this is going to improve your life, when in reality, you need to be cultivating wisdom. So as long as you're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, thinking that that's going to improve your life, you're lacking the ability to focus on cultivation of wisdom and improving your moral conduct, for example.
Okay, so it seems to me then what I've learned in practice and from what you just said, that when there's enough wisdom, there won't be the precepts won't be violated.
That's true.
And same with the personality view will have to go away when there's enough wisdom. And the first 3 fetters basically be gone.
Did you say when there's enough wisdom that the personality would be gone?
No, just the first 3 fetters.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the first 3 fetters, when there's enough wisdom, yeah, you'll have eliminated those. In fact, when there's enough wisdom, you'll eliminate all the fetters, right? So the ignorance is the very last fetter to eliminate. So you need the wisdom. One of the wisdoms you need is, what are the fetters? So that's something that everybody needs to learn.
Okay. Is OCD rituals part of this third fetter? Like if you feel like you need to wash your hands 4 times before they're clean.
That's part of sensual desire.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. So it looks like Ted or Kristen has a question.
David, obviously Ted here. The skeptic in me, always when we get to, you'll come back in the heavenly realm, or you'll come back 7 times, or you'll always spikes up a little mistrust. No, that's not really the label that I'm trying to apply, which I shouldn't be applying to begin with. But it makes me wonder, because you say after one is enlightened, they do not come back, nor does the Buddha teach really what happens afterwards. But then you were speaking of the memory once you become enlightened, and how you could see past lives, and so maybe that is how it was determined how many times you would come back in each of the 4 phases of enlightenment. I guess that's a question or a statement, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I can share with you what your mind is doing is that when you're hearing these things that you haven't been able to independently confirm, your doubt is arising, the doubt about the teachings. That's what's actually arising, and that's what's going to hinder you from being able to make further progress. So what you do when you hear these things, you're just like, all right, I hear that. I understand what the Buddha is teaching. I understand what David's teaching. I'm just going to set that to the side, right? This whole idea of the 5 realms, the cycle of rebirth, whether or not you come back into the world a certain number of times, you don't have a way of independently verifying any of those things right now because you just started learning and practicing in like the last year or so. So you just set all that stuff aside, realize, I'll get to it when I get to it. Let me just focus on the Eightfold Path, investigating this, practicing this on a day-to-day basis, helping my mind to get to more and more pollution out of the mind and eliminating it. And that's what's going to experience more and more confidence in these teachings. And then a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it might be, 3 years, when you're ready to approach the cycle of rebirth and these other things, you can approach it then. And you'll have a much more clear mind at that point, and you'll have practiced a lot of things and seen a lot of progress in your day-to-day life. So I would suggest you just set all that kind of stuff to the side and just understand that's what he's teaching. I understand that's what is being shared, but I don't have a way to confirm it right now, so I just set it to the side. I'm not believing in it, and I'm not denying it. I'm just choosing not to address it at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Marta, you're welcome very much. Pleased to help you there. Let me see. Oh, Adela has a question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, David. Yes, my question is, is there a heavenly realm, or does the Buddha believe there is a heavenly realm, or is there not? Because I'm also, I guess, experiencing some doubt, as the previous person mentioned, when it comes to kind of this reaching a state of enlightenment, or coming back. Or there was one of the terms on there was where a person goes into the heavenly realm at a certain point. So it's just, to me, it's like, well, the Buddha is teaching, I think you mentioned during this chat, that, how to live your life right now, how to achieve content and enlightenment in the current life that you're living. So it's like, why would there even be a focus on a heavenly realm, or a realm after the current life that we're living?
Sure. So the Buddha is not focusing on the heavenly realm, and he doesn't believe in anything. An individual who's gotten to enlightenment, they don't have any beliefs. They know the truth with 100% certainty. So the Buddha does teach about the 5 realms, and one of those realms is the heavenly realm, but there's no focus on it. He's just explaining to you that this is what exists, because if you start having interaction with those beings, like you start seeing them or hearing them, you understand that it's normal. But it's not that everybody is going to go through these 4 stages. It's not like you're going to get to one stage, die, experience that, another stage, die, experience that, another stage, die, experience that. So let's just say you've never learned these teachings ever in your entire life, this life or some previous life. You could actually learn and grow and develop, make your way all the way through those stages of enlightenment, and actually you'll know that you're experiencing enlightenment in this life because your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. The aspect of the 3rd stage of enlightenment is that if you happen to die in that stage, you'll have done a significant amount of work, and there is rebirth into the heavenly realm, and then that individual will get to enlightenment in that existence. But that's not the goal of these teachings, and that's not an emphasis of what the Buddha is focusing on. He's focusing you on getting to enlightenment, getting to an arahant where the mind is actually enlightened, and that's what you would like to set your goal on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll add, Adela, is that getting to enlightenment, at that point, you're living the ideal life in terms of your mind is completely peaceful and joyful. Everything you're doing, you will enjoy every single aspect of your life. There is no part of your life that is feeling miserable or horrible or anything like that, that you've completely transformed your entire mind and your life, and now you're living the ideal life. So no matter when you get to enlightenment, you'll be experiencing that peace and joy all the way through to the end of this life.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Pleased to help you. So I'm just going to make one more round here and see if we have any other questions. I don't see anything anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end by thanking all of you guys for joining today's class. Thank you for your interest to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. as I shared, next week, I'm going to be teaching chapter 1. We're going to be starting from the very beginning. And for every Sunday from here on out, we're just going to be going chapter by chapter by chapter in the book. So if you would like to be reading that either before or after class, that would be really wise, because there's certain things in the book that aren't in the classes. And there's certain things in the classes that aren't in the book. If you happen to not read or something like that, you can still come to class and learn. That's completely fine. That might be where you're at in your life. But if you're also reading, you're going to get so much more benefit out of it. And these chapters are oftentimes only 15 or 20 minutes to read. I think there's only maybe 2 chapters that are about an hour to read. And you would actually like to read that little by little, just 15 or 20 minutes a day, gradually progressing through the book. And remember, you can get this from our website for free. You can print it yourself. You can get printed versions on Amazon, or you can get it here at the temple in Chiang Mai. This Wednesday, I'm going to be starting a 4-part series on loving kindness meditation, where I'm going to be building you up with this loving kindness meditation. And then we're going to be doing it each Sunday as well. So I'm going to be teaching it on Wednesday. And if you can't attend, you can always look at the recording, because I'm going to walk you through and help you to understand it. And then instead of just breathing mindfulness meditation, each Sunday, we're going to be doing the loving kindness meditation. And then ultimately, we're going to be rotating those when we get to that point. But for the next 4 Sundays, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation, which is going to help you get rid of that ill will that's in the mind. So again, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate that you're continuing to learn and grow and develop on this path. As you have questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I'm here to help you guys. So whatever you choose to do for the rest of your day, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.